Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I transformed my son into Chucky. As most of you know, my son can get sensory overloaded, especially in the face area, but we did it. We had fun while we did it.
It's gonna be way too much.
Started a little bit nervous, but we took deep breaths and we were fine. You'll actually see him smiling throughout the video and actually kind of getting into character at some points. As always, I start by mapping out the face with an eyebrow pencil, and I am of course using a reference of Chucky to know where I want to place all the cuts and the skin missing around the eye. I also paled out his lips because Chucky's lips aren't very pink. So I used my foundation on his lips and just blended it out a little bit. I then went in with a small brush into my red face paint. I used Maron paints, and I outlined all the markings that I did in the brown eyebrow pencil. And I try to give the cuts a little bit more form with this red. And I did this by extending some of the cuts and making them thinner at the ends or adding little like branched out cuts. I then went in with a thicker brush and that same red paint and filled in the area of the eye. This part was a little difficult because he did not like the wet paint, but I did it in a few steps, let him breathe, and I continued. Try to do it as fast as I could. Again, taking deep breaths. I then went into a burgundy shade and set that paint around the eye area so it wouldn't crease. After that, I went into a black and darkened the eye area to make it look more sunken in. I moved onto a dome shader smudge brush to be able to darken the edges of that eye a little bit. With a pointier brush, I then went in and darkened those cut areas that were thicker with the same black eyeshadow.
See, you're okay, right? Because it's just face paint. Look that one.
And then with an even smaller brush, I took that same black shadow and shaded in all the smaller cut areas, again, to deepen those cuts and make them look just a little bit more deep. I also took a brighter red and put it on the lid area to pop that part of the eyeball a little bit, just a little bit, not too much, because we still want to give the illusion of that the eye skin is missing and it's under a little bit. Then with a small brush, I'm going in with a black face paint and making the stitches around the cuts, just doing them different ways so they're not uniform. I then went in with an angled brush and a light red eyeshadow and followed all the cuts and dragging out a little bit to create irritation along the cuts. So I just went between every little stitch and dragged out a little bit with that light red eyeshadow. And I did this along the skin missing around the eye and every single cut that I made. Taking a small brush and white paint, I went in and outlined all the cuts on both sides to make it seem like the skin is up higher and raised, kind of popping out in those areas. That way the cuts look even more deep and we are creating that depth. It looks a little bright right now, but I will go in with a small pointer brush into that light red shadow and kind of go over the white so it doesn't look too bright. And I'm doing this along in between all the little stitches. I really want this to look three-dimensional, and it's hard to do that with just paint, but I did not want to put any special effects on him. I did not want to work with latex because I know that he does not like that, so I'm trying to keep it minimal. And then this is the part where I go in with that shadow and go over all the white parts to make them not as bright. That way they don't pop out too much. We want this to look as realistic as possible. He does a little frown right there, getting into character. So because I touched all the stitches with doing all the shading, I went back in with the same black and lined those stitches again, just to make them a little bit stand out a little bit more. I then went in with a black eyeshadow, and on each point, on each stitch, I created a little small shadow to create that illusion that the stitches are actually going into the skin. And Chucky actually has this frown, kind of mad face all the time, so I had to make a mad face, and then in with my angled and a brown shadow, I created the creases on the eyebrows, so that when he's not even frowning, it would still look like he is. And I created a line across the nose as well to create that mad face. Chucky also has kind of like a little indent on his forehead that makes him look even more angry and evil, so I try to shadow that in with a brown eyeshadow. You see all the little faces he's making. I then took a silver face paint and I painted on the staples that Chucky has. I referenced the picture for the placements, and that's why I placed them where I did. I will do the same thing to the staples as I did to the stitches, where I shaded in a little bit of black shadow on the points to make it seem like the staples are going into the skin. I also did some shading around the lips to make them a little bit more pouty and smaller. I also created that cheek crease to make it more doll-like. Again, Chucky has some kind of folds around the eye area. I wanted to do it as best as possible, but it was really difficult getting him to allow me to be around the eye. So I just shaded very lightly to just give it some illusion of a fold, but not completely. I did end up doing a little bit of white to make that pop. And Chucky does have a downward kind of pointy nose, so I contoured his nose. I went around the nostrils and created a triangle at the top of his nose, or at the tip of his nose, and then smudged it out with a smudge brush. I also went in with a little bit of blush and put it on the apples of his cheeks very, very lightly. And then I painted his eyebrows, because Chucky is a redhead, with orange face paint, and mixed in a little bit of red.
Oh, I look like a dog.
Okay, stop.
This kid is super, super silly. It's always fun to do looks on him when I can. I'm then going to do Chucky's shirt. I do not have a striped shirt, so I had to paint it on. I only did, I didn't do too low. It was really difficult to do because, again, his sensory overload doesn't allow him to stay still. So this came out kind of messy, but it still worked out. You guys get the point of the look. He's loving it at this point. This part coming up is where he starts to get really into character.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Boo.
He tried to scare you guys. So along the sleeve, I went the opposite direction. I went down to create that start of the arm with the shirt. I did slick back his hair with some pomade to give it that Chucky look. And then I went in with some red and orange face paint to paint his hair. Again, Chucky is not a brunette. He has orangey red hair, so I try to create the look as close as possible. For all the baby hairs, I used a spoolie, and for the rest of the hair, I used a brush. And I tried to cover as much as possible. I then added the final touch, which was Chucky's well-known overalls. And just like that, I turned my son into Chucky. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you liked this video, and I'll see you in my next one.